Okay, so we're going to talk about M&E and change. I've put the word change rather than impact because I think impact is a very technical term, which really means what change have we brought about. So next slide. So whenever we do an M&E, there are 3 questions you should have in your head all the time. Any M&E, whether it's monitoring, whether it's evaluation, whether it's impact, whether it's learning, there are 3 questions you should always have in your head at all times. The first one is, are we doing what we said we would do? That's the internal validity of what we said we were going to do. Have we actually done it? Are we making a difference? Do we make a difference to people's lives, or are we just plodding on and on and on and not making any difference at all? That's the impact, this word impact. And then finally, are these the right things to do, which is the strategic relevance and learning. And for me, that's the one you should really be concentrating on, I think, for yourselves. It's that if we're doing things that don't make a change, then probably we shouldn't be doing them. And we should be doing something else. So we should be checking if it is the right thing to do. Okay, next slide. So I've just done some definitions because I think it's important that we all are thinking the same way as a group. So monitoring is the regular collection of data on specified indicators during the lifetime of a project. It provides the managers and the main stakeholders with information about the progress against planned activities and budgets towards achieving objectives. So is the intervention doing what it said it would do efficiently and to an adequate quality? So it's really about keeping an ongoing, looking at regularly, what are we doing? Are we doing the right thing? Evaluation is the systematic assessment of the results, the outcomes or the impact are words that we use in M&E, of an ongoing or completed project or program at a specific point in time. Usually it's at the midterm or the project end, and often it's asked to examine the efficiency, effectiveness, relevance, impact, and sustainability of the work. I always see it as the monitoring is using your eyes, evaluation is clicking a camera. What can we see at this moment? Where are we and where did we come from? The next slide is learning, which is Bruce Britton, who's a hero of mine, says it's the social process by which we develop knowledge, skills, and insights, beliefs, values, attitudes, habits, feelings, wisdom, shared understanding, and self-awareness. That's an amazing statement, isn't it? That's everything. It's our growth, it's us ourselves, as well as the people around us. How do we as individuals learn? And then how does the Penn Centre learn? And impact, I've put this one in because I think it's important to remember that we want to make change in people's lives, and the word that we use and our donors will use is impact. The positive, negative, lasting changes in people's lives produced by our intervention. These can be produced directly or indirectly by the project and be intended or unintended changes. In other words, did this intervention make a difference? Okay, so I don't know how many of you have ever used log frames or results-based management, but I would say that what we need to think about is in this results space, there's a sort of ladder that we need to do, that we need to follow in order to be able to monitor and evaluate our work. So at the beginning of a project, we think about the change we want to make, the impact, the positive or negative impact of people's lives that we're working with. In order to measure that impact, we need to know what the outcomes are, the lower level changes, the short and medium term changes that should be realized as a result of the intervention's output. And in order for us to measure outcomes, we need to measure the outputs, the tangible goods and services produced by the activities. And then the inputs or activities are what we do in order to measure the outputs. So if we go the other way around, we have to do the activities, and however much whatever the inputs we have to provide in order to do those activities, those will produce the outputs. The outputs will produce the outcomes, the change, the lower level change, and then that should produce the wider impact or the change in people's lives. So those are the 4 steps that we want to measure in order to bring about the change that we want to change, in order to be able to measure that we have brought about that change, or that we can answer those 3 questions that I talked about at the beginning. Next slide. Can we go to the next slide, Mary? Sorry. So why does PEN measure change? That's a big question, isn't it? And it's because PEN wants to learn. I think that's all of you. That's why you're all here. You want to learn and you want to share what works and what doesn't work. I think you're strengthening your work by adapting the approach and building into your strategies. So when new strategies are developed, you've learned from previous work and previous strategies. And because we are accountable to both the project participants, the people that we're working with, the funders, and we're accountable to ourselves, to PEN. We want PEN to do well wherever it is in the world. So we are also accountable to ourselves. Next slide. So what I'm going to do today is introduce 2 participatory tools that will help you to build a complex picture of change. Because as we all know, change is not straightforward. It's not, if I do this, then the world will change. If it was like that, then we wouldn't be living in the complexity of life that we live now. So I'm going to introduce 2 tools, team self-reviews and stories of change, that should be able to help us to do that. The first one is team self-reviews. Next slide. Great. So what is a team self-review? I put a treasure chest there because I believe the treasure chest of M&E is locked away in the heads of the people who are doing the project. And that's what the team self-review is about, opening the treasure chest and bringing all these jewels and gold out, all the things that are in the heads, locked away in the heads of the team who are managing and working on the project. So it's you. Okay. The implementing team, and this is the process that I would like you all to go through. The implementing team sit together and complete the answers to the 3 universal questions that I mentioned earlier on in the presentation. Are we doing what we said we would do? Are we making a difference? And are we doing the right things? So are we doing what we said we would do? I think it's really important to think that this is not about listing what we've done. It's about an overview of what happened in the last few months of the project. Examples of what was different to what was planned. If we said we were going to provide writing training to 10 women and we only provided it to 5, it's not that that's a failure, but that it's different because lots of things happened around us and we were not able to do it. So it's capturing those little gems, the whys of why things were different. Or if you did 20, not 10, then how were you able to do with that? What was the magic that helped you to do more? So it's actually capturing not the list of we did these training courses, but we did them because this environment was such, or because we were able to, or we had extra people, or the participants were all really good participants. It's capturing that little bit of magic that's in your heads. Question 2 is, are we making it? Are we making a difference? The team that's sitting down to do this should identify 3 aspects of the project they believe are making the biggest difference to the target group. So if you're working with women writers, what are the 3 things within the project that are making the biggest difference to those women's lives because of what you're doing? It could be those women, it could be the beneficiaries, it could be the communities, the way you're working with communities, it could be local organisations working with, or it could be your partners. Any of those, you just need to identify 3 things in the project that you believe are making the biggest difference to the target group. Question 3, so you're all still sat together. And remember, these 3 questions, it would probably take you half a day to go through them as a group within your Penn Centre. Are we doing the right things? This gives you room in your team to reflect and share your opinions and knowledge. So if one of you feels, well, actually that didn't go very well, and the others think, well, it did go well, then you have time to discuss that. Why do you think it didn't? Why do I think it did? And sharing knowledge that sometimes you're doing something and it's in your head and you just have been so busy doing the project, you don't have time to share. This is your opportunity to sit down and share what you know. You need to explore what's been going well and why it was going well. What has not been going so well and why has it not been going so well? And then I think finally you should end up together thinking, well, what might have been better? How could we have done it better? What do we think we could have done that would have made it better? And so this is the stages that we're going to ask you to use if you use this tool. All projects and program teams conduct the team self-review process and answer the 3 universal questions. So if in your Penn Centre you have 4 different projects, all of them would conduct a team self-review individually. Each team should then write a very short 1 to 1.5 to 1.5 pages, highlighting the most powerful findings. What did you capture out of your discussions? These short team reports should then go to a distillation team of 3 people. And what's really important is those 3 people, everyone trusts in the organisation, everybody wants to work with. And they need to read them, and then they answer the same 3 questions. What went well? Did we do what we said we were going to do? Did we make a difference? And did we do the right things? They ask the 3 same questions for the whole organisation and write a short organisational team self-review. Now within Penn, I think what's going to happen is that each centre will then send that team self-review to PEN International, who will again distill a little more into say, this is what PEN International is doing. The final organizational self-review should be short, it should be readable, and a powerful statement of where you are making the most difference. And a series of these team self-review reports can be aggregated to show impact across the whole organization, which I believe is what PEN International is planning to do. Okay. So my next question was, do any of you feel that you would be able to use this tool? And we'll start looking at questions in the chat box as well. Any of you feel that you could use this tool in your own centres? Okay, so we've got a question from Tom Him about evaluation form. I think there are evaluation forms at PEN. Maria, you probably know better than I do, or Salwa. There are evaluation forms, or there's forms that you complete to send to PEN International. Is that right, Salwa? Or Romana, you're still with us. Maybe you could explain.
Yes, well, we have our reporting forms, and the reporting forms ask these three very important questions, and we like to be guided. So we ask, you know, what was actually delivered, what were the outputs of the project, and then we ask the three universal questions, and that's the place where you can provide the information that you've done either through yourself, team self-reviews, or through the story of change. So there are guidelines that we present to centres when they're reporting on their projects. And then, of course, we're very happy to give one-on-one support to centres through our regional coordinators or through the civil society project team, which is myself and Salwa. So yeah, it's quite simple. We want to keep it simple, but it's important that we get this gold information that you have all in your heads, as Anne has said.
Brilliant.
And I would like also to add that for this specific project, because it's focused on digital comms, we also ask to fill out a form about your, to reflect the impact on your social media and your website over the course of the project. And therefore, the form, the baseline in a reporting form, I already sent to those of you who are on this digital comms project, and that you should be returning to me hopefully as soon as possible. And then at the end of the project, we'll send it again so that we can actually see that growth on your platforms.
Any questions or thoughts? Alicia is saying she's sure you'll be able to use them. Oh, negative impact follow. That's an interesting question. Anyone else can think of a negative impact that they have found in their own organisations, in their own PEN centres? Anybody had a negative impact? No? I can give you a negative impact not for PEN, if that would help. Yeah, would you like? Okay. I recently have been doing some work with the HIV/AIDS program in Africa, and there's been a change in the legislation is not very positive for people who have same-sex partnerships. And the organisation had been doing some work towards getting the legislation changed. And what has happened is the whole, a lot of people in the country have gone against the organisation because they're trying to change the law. And so the traditional people in the country have had a really negative response. So that would be a negative impact on some work the organisation was doing. Does that explain it?
Yeah. Thank you.
That's okay. Any other questions or thoughts on that tool? A sample. Well, that's true. Romana.
Hello.
I wondered if we could give an unintended
Hello.
consequence.
An
Hello.
unintended. Hello.
Yes, I'd like to know if there's a specific period which we allot to this M&E team self-review.
A specific.
Is it a specific period of the project at which we would conduct this?
I'm not sure I
Is it
understand.
periodic? Is it for a specific period that we say we are supposed to conduct this?
Sorry,
Yes,
period. Yeah,
Yes.
I'm not sure how often you're asked to do these. Maria will know better than myself.
Okay.
I think Romana in this case, because I'm not, so far I haven't heard so much of the self-team reviews.
I mean, I think it depends on the capacity of the centre, but I think it's a good idea if once, you know, if you're doing a year-long project, to come together every 3 months and to reflect, to look at these questions and to reflect, are we doing what we said we would do? Is it working? I think this is just, you probably do this already, but it's about recording it and then learning from it and applying any adjustments you may want to make to the project as you're going along. So, you know, projects are not, you're not static. We're always learning and the context is always changing. And so if we come together often to review our plans, to review what we've done, we can adjust. We can adjust given the context, given the resources, and see how we adapt our project to really deliver what we, the outcomes, the outcomes that we're trying to achieve.
Brilliant. Thanks, Romana. So it's three monthly we're thinking of at the moment.
If it's possible, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Good. An unintended consequence or an unintended impact or change may be that you had decided to do a training course with women, or you wanted, yes, writers training course with women, and then COVID-19 pops along and we can't all sit together, we can't all meet together, so suddenly there's an unintended consequence that the training didn't get done because of COVID-19. Yep. Or it could be an unintended consequence, could be that you work with a group of women and those women go home and train their husbands or their children. And the unintended consequence is that actually not only has the literacy improved in the women, but it's improved in the children and the husbands. That would be an unintended consequence or an unintended change that your work brought about. And you would only find that out through these sorts of meetings where you sit and say, well, what happened? Why did it happen? Those sorts of things will pop up. Is that okay, Romana?
I think so, yes, Anne, that's great, thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions or thoughts or any concerns about the tool itself? No? So I'm looking forward to seeing all your team self-review responses from next week and the week after. Yes? Yes, good. Okay, so shall we move on to the second tool? Oh, hi, Musa. Romana's saying hi to Musa. Oh. Okay, so we're going to move on to stories of change. And we want to think about how Penn and why Penn uses stories of change and know what makes a story of change useful as a piece of qualitative evidence that you have brought about that change. So it's a tool for evaluation and learning. It's a really important tool. And I think because you're all writing organizations, you should be very good at doing them. They can be in any form. They don't have to be written. They could be videos, they could be plays, they could be storytelling ways. Any of those communication ways, a story of change can be provided. It's an account of what has changed for those involved in a project or program from just any perspectives. It should be from more than one perspective. Often one of us can say that this is what changed, but of course other people have a different perspective. For me, what would be a successful change in my children when they were small may not have been successful for them. They may have seen it as, if I sent them to bed on time, that's a success to me, but for them, they may not have wanted to go to bed that early. So I think there's something about, you have to look at the different perspectives. They should be transparent, they should be honest, and they should be collaborative. They shouldn't be just one person's view. It must also look at the wider impact or implications in the context of the whole project. Okay. So these are some examples. They're not so easy to read, and you'll be able to read them when you look at the recording later on. But PEN Philippines, they're running a civil society project in which they carry out trainings and seminars for teachers of literature, encouraging more local literature to be taught in schools and universities. At their seminars, they have started doing selfie competitions. During the conference, participants are invited to tweet or Facebook with a hashtag, and they collect in all those quotes and stories and use stories to make wider analysis. That's a great use of stories. PEN Bosnia did a photo essay bringing divided communities together, collected photos from their book clubs and workshops, and gathered a number of different quotes. They then did an essay analysis around why this project is so important to the different people involved. And with PEN Uganda, they did a sort of, as you can see, it's a bit of a skit or a little play where they, sister, they have set me free. So it's a little skit about that example. Okay. So how does PEN use stories of change? What we believe is that stories of change to be more capable of describing the richness and complexity of individual or organization or societal change. Stories are so much better than reports, we're saying. Writing a report does not give you all that richness and complexity that comes from describing things through stories. We use stories of change are used in isolation. One PEN Centre could write, as you saw, there was 3 there, a very interesting story of change. But if we could, there's another tool called Most Significant Change we're not going to use today, but it's where you bring all those different stories together and they build a much more complex change. You can actually draw them together. PEN uses stories of change for fundraising, because obviously if you can put a really good story on your website, you can send a really good story to your donor, it will bring funds in. they use it, Penn uses it for reporting, which I think is one of the greatest way of reporting is through stories of change. We can learn from stories of change, so much more difficult to learn from a formal report. And then you can attract new partners. If you have exciting stories on your website, that will bring new partners. And also getting individuals with influence to engage with Penn's work. If you write a good story, influential people will read it and engage with the work. Okay, that one again. So it's about organizational learning, and it's strengthening of projects. And also we can use it for M&E, because stories of change tell a more honest story and get a wider picture about the impact of an intervention or a project. They pick up unexpected change, which is something Romana was talking about earlier, as well as expected change. And if they're done correctly, they make M&E much more participant-led, not external and guided by donors. It doesn't rely on indicators, and it has a central concept than the more orthodox approaches to M&E. So the key principles of a story of change we need to ensure it's being robust when you're collecting them. And that means that it's not just one person's opinion. There is multiple and different perspectives, and being journalistic in your approach, checking the facts, going back, making sure that the story fits together. It's got its glue in the middle, it fits together. You should avoid being too extractive. You should be, when you're getting your participants or your staff to help do stories of change, you should be telling them how you'll use those stories, not just take them away and use them and don't explain why. You should get consent for any story of change. Feedback on how you're going to use their story, and feedback the story if you can. Ask open questions and nothing too directive. It's not why did you do it or how did you. It is why and how, but it's not in terms of don't guide them, don't be too directive. And question questions with questions. So you're questioning all the time to draw out the information from the person so they can share their story of change. You need to show policymakers and funders and the wider public that the work is important and that they should be engaging with Penn. Penn's work is very important. And we all know that, but we need to share that with people who don't know it. And the stories of change will do that. A good story of change will engage people. It will also help us to understand if we're doing what we said we do, if we're making a difference, and if we're doing the right things. All that will come out, will help us to understand it in a good story of change. It's true that Penn people are storytellers. And that goes from the participants who use Penn, who come to the centres, to the presidents yourselves. This is what makes Penn different to other organisations. You are storytellers. And this is a great participatory approach. If you do stories together, it's a great way of participating and working together. In your groups, we're now going to do an activity. We're going to have a go at doing a story of change from one Penn centre. And then the other what we're going to do is we're going to ask one person from each group to share a story of change from their Penn Centre. And the other members of that group will interrogate that story with a series of questions. We'll show you the questions first. Yeah, they're just 5 questions. I want you to ask, what was the situation before your project? It'd be good if you could write these down, because you may not see the slides when you go into your group. So it'd be great if you could just write the questions down. What was the situation before your project? Why did you decide to do this project? Who are the people whose lives changed? Why did you choose this story? And whose perspective are you telling this story from? Are there other perspectives? Okay, so we're going to ask each group to feedback how the little session went in terms of gathering or capturing the how you influence the story of change using the questions, and if you gained any knowledge or learned anything from the exercise. So I just asked, I think group 1, Wesi has agreed to feedback. Hey there, Wesi, you're on mute. Wesi?
I'm here.
Can you feedback on the session?
Yes, it was an interesting session. I shared a story of change in Malawi that we've seen, we've experienced, about a women's organization, a women's group that we worked with in a certain community. It's a rural community, actually. They have a library, but we gave them books. We provided them with books in local languages. The motivation, okay, now people started asking questions after I had shared this story. What was the situation before? And I had explained that the situation was that these women that we were working with were just sitting at home. They were housewives. They had nothing to do, and most of them were illiterate. Why did you decide to do this project? It's because of the high illiteracy levels that we had seen and high poverty levels. And the impact of that program was that these women eventually started gardening, they started entrepreneurship, they started engaging in a lot of things that would that benefited their lives in a positive manner, such that the whole society was able now to see that there is a change in these women, and even themselves would testify that there's this change. Now, one interesting question that maybe is not on the list, but I was asked and it really got my interest was, now, because this program is phased out, after the program, do you still, or after the project, do you still communicate with these beneficiaries, you know, as a sector, of which we do not. But of course, as individuals, we do. But this has really given us an eye-opener that maybe once in a while, as an organization, we could still go back and act as a motivation to them. Apart from that, these stories we also use communicate. Somebody asked a question on communication. How do you communicate to the wider society? And as Spain, I think I mentioned that we have not done well on that as well, because apart from maybe communicating to Penn International, we have not communicated to the wider society in Malawi. So I was saying, now that the world maybe is getting more and more digital, we can form a website or maybe post us or have a page on Facebook where we just showcase some of the changes that Penn interventions have brought about. Yeah, thank you very much. I am not sure if I've missed anything and or anyone else could help me. Thank you.
No, thanks, Wesley. That's brilliant. And I think that's a really important thing you did bring up, that we can have a list of questions given to us, but actually it's the journalistic approach of things come into your head and you ask questions that are more than on that list. And I think you're right. It was good to say that's what happened in the group, that the list started us off, but then people started thinking about their own questions, which also strengthened the story. So that's brilliant. Thanks, Wesley.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Can we move on to group 2? Who was leading on group 2?
It was a Mo thing. Hey Mo, would you like to introduce your story of change and what you talked in the activity group?
Do any one of you? Actually, we didn't discuss in the break room. So, do any one of you can want to share?
Or maybe you can start, and then if someone else wanna add something that you forget,
Okay.
they can do it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great. So my story of change was that it hasn't happened. We haven't done the project yet, but we're hoping to do it next month. It's a constructive fiction project that we're developing with the Joint Peace Fund. It's based on peace building within communities and ethnic minorities. It is about developing a compile short stories in a book to develop that book to be able to give the writers a chance to write their true fiction that narrates a favorable attitude towards peace and inclusion, promotes empathy, addresses the negative impact of stigma, stereotypes, and rumors. So what is the situation before this project? So we're hoping to do a peace building fiction, constructive fiction, to represent the realities of different ethnic groups, and which includes messages that promote peace, and it's aimed to avoid wars that can be conflict, racist discrimination, misinformation, disinformation. So yeah. And why did we decide to do this project? So as many of you might know, Myanmar has very complex political journey throughout these over the centuries. So in those times, we feel that there is a lack of ethnic inclusivity, because the majority doesn't know the real truth, or they don't know how things are really bad, or how things are different because of these ethnicity. So yeah, based on that, we brought up this idea for this project to do this compile of short stories for constructive fiction. And the people we are hoping to target are the writers generally, because to giving them a chance to making them say their stories, share their stories with other, to know that the majority will know that how are things different for minorities and ethnicities and other literature inclusiveness, to promote that. And the fourth question is, why did you choose these stories? So why did we choose these stories? I think I answered that in the previous information, to discrimination, racism, and all those sensitive issues, and understanding people that how hate speech can do not harm those kind of aspects, so that people can understand, the readers can understand the those values, those topics. Whose perspective are you telling the story from? I will be saying a reader. I didn't know that things are. I mean, I am an other religion. I am Hindu, so it is definitely different for me. Different priorities, different opportunities. Not being able to include in some aspect that will be easy for other languages or other religions. So yeah, as a reader, I would like to know what writers and even a person, individual person, will go through these opportunities, not being able to, not feeling that they are part of this group too. It's also a very important topic. I feel that other aspects, perspective. Yeah, I think so. As I mentioned, that my majority also need to know what minorities and ethnicities, other groups are going through.
Absolutely.
They need to know the truth, deeply rooted, to connect, to deeply make the connection, the relationship between these interspace between these two groups. So I don't know if I covered all the questions. So yeah, that's that. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Do anyone else in that group has something to add to what Amo said?
Yeah, what actually, there was a question from Toyin that actually drew a point for me in Mo's presentation. When Mo talked about also targeting those with power and influence who could help to amplify this very idea or concept when it is implemented. So for me, it's better that way because beyond the pen influence in Myanmar, because Myanmar the situation is a very complex one. With those with influence and power, I think the idea will go a long way. So if actually they will be able to galvanize the interest of those with political power and religious influence in Myanmar.
Good. Any other thoughts from that group on the exercise, really? Thank you, Amo. That was fantastic presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And now it's group 3.
Yes, Eliza was leading that group.
Hey there, Liza. Ooh. Eliza, you're muted.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes, am I back online?
You are.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah, I responded to the 6 questions by talking about the project that we heard in 2019, which we had named Promoting Engagement Nationally. So it was a project where we were trying to have pen activities reaching out to all the corners of the country. So I responded to the questions, but possibly to bring in an independent perspective, I may ask Sawa to maybe talk about how I responded to the questions so that I don't repeat myself, just for the purpose of bringing in a different or independent perspective to how I responded, if she can do that on my behalf. Hello?
Elisha, you've put me on the spot. I didn't take any notes.
Is it? No, I'm just trying to bring an independent perspective.
I think
it's my way of checking whether people were following up.
We were following, but I wasn't taking any notes, unfortunately.
The other members will assist you.
Yeah, I think I'll get Mr. Musa's help. And Yon, where's Yon? Oh, he's disappeared. Okay, I think Elisha spoke to us about a project where they were trying to, okay, now I'm confused. Sorry, I've got so many things that Mr. Musa spoke about that I'm now getting confused between the two. But Elisha's project, well, coming from a finance background, I've got no knowledge of what Story of Change is. And I think Elisha tried to tell us about the projects that they did and the type of impact and how it affected people. And his story of change, he was talking about the beneficiaries telling them how it improved them, got them to become more vocal, represent themselves. And he was also saying that the story of change was also from their perspective. Am I right, Elisha? I might be confusing your story and Mr. Musa's and Yon's.
Yeah, I said our story of change was from our perspective as the organizers, right? And also from the perspective of the beneficiaries. So, because at the end of the day, we did an evaluation, also interviewing the people that had been involved. So it was from our perspective and the perspective of the beneficiaries. Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, so just responding to whose perspective it was coming from. So it was from our perspective as the organizers and the perspective of the beneficiaries.
I think you should also share a bit of the story of change, so for everyone else's benefit that was not in our group.
No, is it? Right. So among other things, like I've already indicated, that we were trying to create awareness of our PEN activities throughout the country, because previously our activities were centered in the capital city and we didn't have these activities going on in other parts of the country. So our project was like, we wanted to reach out to all parts of the country, and we were able, out of the 9 provinces that we have, to organize events in the 6 of the provinces. So, and there we were able to also recruit new PEN members from the activities that we had done. And the most important thing that we noted was how we were able to influence the young people, especially the young women, to also get involved, such to an extent that at the end of the project, we had actually other young people who had been inspired to write their own stories and create their own stories. When we actually submitted our report to PEN International, we actually submitted, I'm sure, about two books or so that had actually been written by some young women who had actually been inspired from our activities that we had done. So this is the particular story of change that we would want to highlight, to say we were able to inspire the young people, particularly the young women, to also participate in the PEN activities. Hello? Hello?
Thank you, Elisha.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, that was his position. That's what happened in Zimbabwe.
Yes, and I have a question. Can you share a little bit more of the activities or the main activities? So just to have an idea of actually what was that triggered the interest from women.
Okay, we held some workshops, right, where we were like teaching people how to create stories, how to write stories. And we also had workshops where we were educating people on what PEN is all about, talking about the issues of the Girona Convention, talking about the Women Manifesto. So it was like people were interested to know that when it comes to literature, there's a worldwide interaction, and they can actually be part of this movement. So these are the things that we would talk about in the workshops, teaching people how to write and also educating them about PEN and what it stands for. Have I responded to the question?
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you all for your feedback and the interest you've shown. Is there any other questions or thoughts people would like to share before we bring the webinar to a close? Ah, Salwa.
And I was just, as Elisha was sharing his story of change, I was just trying to look at his actually PEN Nigeria's story of change, I mean, PEN Zimbabwe's story of change that they presented to us. And I was just thinking, as they were talking about it, obviously for someone like me coming from a finance background, I don't really have much information on this. And my question to the group was, how do you gather this story of changes? And I looked at our document and I just wanted to share. If Maria, you can give me some sharing.
So, Maria, you're muted.
Sorry, there
Okay,
you go.
I'll just share this. So this is the reporting form that we've been using for reporting. So previously we used to ask for a story of change as well as a narrative reporting. And I've just picked, I don't know whether you can all see the screen. These are just some suggestions of story of changes where they're saying you can present a poem or a piece of short prose, spoken word poem, story slam, interview, podcast, journalistic article, blog post, video, photograph with supporting narrative. So I just wanted to share that these are some of the things that you can actually use to reflect your story of change. I know for PEN Nigeria, Ralph submitted a poem for the story of change. So I just wanted to share that. I'm not sure whether it was covered in the presentation. I don't remember seeing that bit.
No, it wasn't. What I covered was there are different ways and different ways. So that's brilliant. Thanks, Alwa. It just added to it, strengthened the presentation. Yeah, thanks. Maria. Oh.
So Salwa, in the case of a poem or something that is a bit, let's say, usually a bit more abstract as an artistic expression, how could that reflect, like it's just, I'm curious, like how could something that is a bit more abstract could reflect that theory of change?
So I think the story of change here is ideally, if you take a person like me who doesn't write at all, and you deliver a creative writing workshop for me, and in that I then produce some writing, that's a story of change because you've turned me from an accountant to a writer. A powerful story of change.
Very.
Which I don't think is possible, but you can all try.
It is possible. It is possible. Yeah, I'm taking it from my experience also. It was through interacting with other writers. I'm also from an accounting background, but through the influence of other writers, I ended up becoming a writer also. So it is very possible.
So we will all look forward to reading poems, Salwa.
It's going to take a while.
Yeah, Salwa, you can do it.
Thank you for the support.
Okay, I think the answer, Maria, to your question is that stories of change, we tend to think of them as something we use for donors or something we use in reports for donors. But I think we need to think stories of change are about learning. And if you think of some poems that can be written, that people write from their souls, they write poems about how their lives have changed or what they've brought to their life, and it's that change that you're trying to capture rather than the academic story that you put into a report. It really is about learning. How can we learn from each other through these stories? And it can be a poem, it can be a song, it can be anything. We can learn from it. If you think of some of the famous pop singers around the world, they tell stories through their songs, and they're very good at it. So I think it's, yes, that's my answer to you. It can be done. But don't think about stories of change as just these things we send to donors, because I think we get tied up in that sort of thinking a little bit. Any other thoughts or questions people want to ask? Follow?
Yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to ask whether Sawa could really post that list to us about the various ways of presenting stories of change, whether we could get it.
Yeah, I think what I can do is either send the document or just add it to the slide that's been presented. That way you have the material with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the link, if you're on the slideshow, the last slide, which we haven't put up yet, is a link to PEN International website. And on there, our good friend Holly, who has moved on now, she's done a lot of materials and these lists of questions on the website. And you can all go into that. And you'll see all these advice and ideas of how to do stories, and the lists like Soha's just mentioned. It's all there on the PEN website, the PEN International website.
Yeah, so we can do both. Like Salwa maybe can include that, or just send me that list and I will include it to the and into the presentation. And then in the presentation you will have both that slide and at the end the link and just mention the resources at the end.
Brilliant. And any other thoughts or questions before we draw to a close? I've got something in chat, I think. Yeah. Brilliant. That's answering. You've just answered those.
Yeah, just to add to the storytelling, I think in terms of experiences and situations all over the world, stories resonate more.
Yeah.
And they're very powerful. I think it's a very good concept. It's a good idea that PEN International is actually exploiting the power of stories.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
And I think that's what makes PEN very special, is that you can all produce stories. You're storytellers, you're writers, you work with writers, you work with storytellers. That makes you special as an organization. You should be using those skills and the passion from within you for writing. You should be using that for your monitoring and evaluation. It's really, really powerful ways of sharing what you're doing and what your changes you're bringing about. So it's brilliant.